Welcome into the Rockies Insider. I'm your Rockies Insider, Patrick Lyons, on this very special induction day for the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. Plenty to talk about with the Colorado Rockies series against the Orioles. Some you might want to talk a little bit more about than others, but still an overall great baseball weekend. Ryan McMahon, how did he fare in New York? It's maybe the dog days of summer, but as we approach the trade deadline and with the inductions in Cooperstown, it's just feels like right now is a good time to be a baseball fan. And even if your team isn't particularly playing well, baseball is in the air. Baseball is that time. And for some families with kids who love baseball or sports, they're going back to school. And so these are the final moments, the final days before school begins, before the football season really starts to heat up. And the preseason for the NFL gets going. The season starts. Next thing you know, it's the NBA and NHL. This is kind of the final time that baseball can really take center stage. And it did so in a big way during the Hall of Fame inductions. But let's get things kick-started with the 3-game set in Baltimore. Colorado, with a win on Friday, a 6-5 victory, their third in a row to put them at 5-2. To start the second half, tied for the best record in all of the National League. Despite that 5-2 record going into Saturday, they get absolutely trounced by the Orioles, who are, yes, in last place in the American League East, 18-0, maybe even more troubling. No, I would say it's less troubling, giving up, or rather having 2 hits is not as troubling, because we've seen that happen to the Rockies when they are on the road, even though they scored 6 runs on Friday night and the offense really seemed to warm up as the game went on. But 2 hits, that's going to happen. It's giving up the 18 runs that can be the more troublesome statistic, the more troublesome number on Sunday, with an opportunity to win their 5th series of the season, 3rd series on the road. They're unable to get it done. They lose 6-1. Their only bit of offense, similar to Saturday night, but their only bit of offense was a warming Bernabel home run, which was wonderful to see, a 385-foot blast for the recently turned 23-year-old first baseman. I thought he was supposed to be a third baseman. I will get to that for sure, but he provides the offense on Sunday. And on the pitching side of things, Austin Gomber still not very good. 4 1/3 innings pitch. I think it wasn't until the 3rd inning that he finally had a swing and miss. Allowed 4 hits, 4 runs, all earned, 3 walks, and 2 strikeouts. Not great. Not really inspiring from a guy that you would hope you'd be able to get something in a trade. But I think he might be worth more to the Rockies than any prospect that can come over, because that prospect might be inconsequential, and opening up a spot in the rotation may not necessarily be something that they are interested in doing, especially when you consider the fact that Carson Palmquist has now joined the ranks of relievers. Currently, right now, the Rockies do not have a left-handed reliever in the bullpen. Ryan Rawlson optioned to AAA on Sunday. And so Carson Palmquist, despite success in the minors as a starting pitcher, he is now working out of the Isotopes bullpen. And so now he is more of a relief arm. That does take away from your starting pitching depth. They've already lost Germán Marquez. And while I am certainly of the camp of getting everything you can for your expiring assets, you absolutely have to. And if the Rockies have done that more, they would be a much better franchise, and they would not be in the mess that they are in right now. Granted, you almost have to do that with every single expiring asset. Take what you can get, because it can be a crapshoot with prospects. But guess what? If you've got 10 prospects, you get 1 new one each and every year for a guy that really doesn't have a ton of value to other teams, and he might be able to help you avoid 100 losses. Now we're really talking about players that can help you from losing 121 games to tie the White Sox record from last year for most losses in modern day history. So you've got a guy that can help you do that. They're not going to help the other team quite as much. The Rockies in the past have typically been inclined to just hold on to those guys. But if you were to trade away a player like that each and every year over the course of 10 years, and let's face it, not very many winning seasons, when you go decade by decade for this franchise. But one of those guys is going to be a very good player that you get, a cast off, if you will, from an organization that doesn't value this player. And sure, I'll take the player of this ilk that maybe is a number 4 or 5 starter, or maybe is a utility infielder, outfielder, or maybe is more like a 6th inning arm and is not going to be somebody dominant to close games down late in the postseason or late in September. We'll give you this guy because we've got enough backup catchers, or we've got enough whatever. Out of those 10 guys that you get that are cast-offs, maybe only 5 of them even reach the majors. Maybe only 3 of them are able to contribute in any capacity, but at least one of those guys could be an everyday player. And if you like your ability to develop, remember, this is a franchise that says that they are draft and develop. Well, then you might even be able to create an all-star out of one of those expiring assets. So I don't think the Rockies can get much right now for a pitcher like Austin Gomber, but take what you can get. Wildly Innocent saying warming with one of the 2 hits in that beatdown on Saturday. Absolutely. Jeff, missed you. It's been a minute. RyMac had to go, but I'll be sad for a long time. He fared well over the weekend with the Yankees. Couple final notes too, worth pointing out. In that 18-0 loss, Rockies also had 2 errors in that game. You didn't like to see that. You did like to see on Friday, the fight was there. The fight was there on Friday. It's not to say that they weren't fighting on Saturday night, but it got out of hand. It got out of reach. I don't want to say quickly, but it certainly wasn't an 8th inning outburst for them. Some of the runs did come in the middle of the later parts of the game. Doesn't matter. But Friday they battled because the Orioles got 2 runs in the first inning, 2 runs in the second inning off Kyle Freeland, who has been known to grind, as Rocky social media said this weekend. They had some interesting posts, but he shut things down after that, and the offense ended up coming back. And the Rockies were down a man. Let's not forget, after the Ryan McMahon trade, they basically played with a 25-man roster because despite the fact that we knew Warming Bernabel was going to come up and he was going to be a part of the 40-man and the 26-man roster on Saturday, he wasn't there on Friday. So they played down a man. Probably fair that the Orioles were also down a man after having traded Gregory Soto to the Mets. So now they've got 2 Sotos. Is Juan going to have a letter J in front of the Soto? Is Gregory going to have a G? Could one of them go with an initial and the other one not? They've already been on the roster together. I didn't follow through to look that up. Don't know that I really care all that much, but in talking with some clubhouse folks in the past, they've said first initials really aren't that necessary for the simple fact that A, guys look different unless they're twins, right? And even in the case of Taylor and Tyler Rogers, who did pitch together on the Giants, okay, they did look a lot alike, but there's one big key difference with those 2. It wasn't that one was righty, that the other one was lefty. It was that they wore a different number. You wear a different number, so you don't need to have that first initial like in the past. I think it's a cool little designation, but at the same time, definitely not necessary to have that first initial on there. Now, Ryan McMahon. Oh, one other thing too with the series. Surprised to see no Brenton Doyle this weekend. Tried to follow up on that. Have not gotten an answer. He's from that area, and I think Warren Schaefer has been platooning Doyle just a little bit, mostly against left-handed pitchers. He seems to fare much better against lefties. It favors the hitters in that way when it's the same side, righty pitcher, righty hitter. It favors the pitcher, lefty hitter. It favors the pitcher. So you had a lefty on the hill for the Orioles and Trevor Rogers, but we didn't see him on Saturday, even late in that game. All right, Ryan McMahon did a decent job endearing himself to the Yankees. It's hard to not be endearing because even if you didn't grow up a Yankees fan, and let's say you grew up in California on the other side of the country, like Ryan McMahon, there's still plenty that you know and can say about the original pinstriped club in the Bronx and the New York Yankees and all their championships. So it's easy to make sure that you can endear yourself just a little bit. What are your thoughts? If you're here live in the chat over on YouTube, if you're only listening to the audio side of things, that's cool. That's great. You can still rate and leave a comment, but you want to make sure you head over to the YouTube side, to the Rockies Insider channel, and subscribe so that you can join me when I do go live post game or earlier on in certain days when there's not a game. But curious, what were your thoughts in seeing him in the Yankee uniform, freshly shaved, despite the fact that you don't have to shave now anymore when you're with the Yankees? They do allow, a nicely trimmed beards, which is what McMahon had at that point, but he trims down just a little bit, looks even younger than his 30 years of age that he currently is. So he made sure to say the right things in the introductory presser, saying, quote, "This is every kid's dream. When you're 9, 10 years old, hitting wiffle balls in the backyard, you're picturing yourself in Game 7 of the World Series at Yankee Stadium. It's going to be very cool." Maybe McMahon was imagining himself with the Dodgers doing it to the Yankees. Regardless, it's the Yankees. You are going to step up. And the fact that, he very much wanted to go to New York, or rather at least embraced the move to New York. And so far he's fared really well. 500 batting average. It's a small sample size, we know. But on Saturday, his first 2 at-bats, he strikes out. Second one, high, up and in. Not a great swing, but the body language definitely looked different. That is something I've been looking out for with Ryan McMahon in the early going, because I don't want to say the body language has been bad for Ryan McMahon, but the last couple years, you can see that frustration on his face almost entirely about himself, not about his teammates. When he strikes out looking or strikes out swinging at a bad pitch, he's upset at himself. But that body language might not exactly fly in New York. And I saw an improved body language. And it really picked up after the first 2 strikeouts, because from there, he walked, he got a single. Then on Sunday, he started the game off with a pair of hits, including an RBI double, ended up scoring the 4th run of the game, which was the difference in the 4-3 win for the Yankees over the Phillies. But Saturday goes 1 for 3. That included a walk, and made a diving play to his right to the foul line, which looked very, very easy. Yankees fans absolutely ate that up. They loved that defensive web gem. On Sunday, 2 for 3. As I said, had the double, was also hit by a pitch. So he reaches base 3 of his 4 plate appearances. And overall, that would be 6 of 8 plate appearances he's gotten on base. That's what that lineup needs now more than ever, especially when you consider that Aaron Judge is currently out of the lineup. UCL injury. Currently on the 10-day IL. Seems like he may need, maybe not exactly Tommy John, because now there are sort of internal braces. There's sort of modified Tommy John surgeries that players can get that will allow them to return a little bit sooner. You might remember Bryce Harper got that done. And by the end of May of the following season, he was able to play some first base. Does that mean Aaron Judge is going to have to be a first base at some point next year? That remains to be seen, but he'll go on the 10-day IL when he comes back. He'll likely have to be the DH with that torn UCL. And Giancarlo Stanton is probably going to have to go to one of the corners. Jason Dominguez is already somewhat of a butcher out in left field. Can they withstand 2 really bad corner outfielders? I don't think so. That makes Ryan McMahon's defense at third base all the more valuable, especially a ball that gets down the line that would traditionally be a double. If you've got Stanton or Dominguez in left field, that's probably a stand-up triple, maybe even inside the park home run, the way those 2 guys are defensively, athletically, frankly. So McMahon's defense on display, Yankees fans loving that. And whatever he's able to provide at the bottom of the lineup is just an additional bonus. We saw him bat 8th in his first game, and so he might end up moving up just a little bit if he continues to get on base a lot, take pitches, which he has been known to do in the past. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that we could see someone like Ryan McMahon batting second for this team, maybe even batting leadoff. I think it must have been at the end of the 2023 season where Bud Black experimented a little bit with Ryan McMahon hitting leadoff, since he takes a lot of pitches, which is good for his teammates to see. And so McMahon's impact is being felt already by the Yankees. It might not be, Eugenio Suarez, hey, this guy is an MVP caliber player this year. No, but incredibly invaluable right now, as the Yankees are down a man. Adrian in the chat saying, very humble guy, talking about Ichiro. Great player. I admire the Japanese. They always seem to be at peace. They strive for a calm existence. Very true. Looking forward to talking about Ichiro here in a moment. Felix signing in. Appreciate you, buddy. I saw a video, a lot more social media content about Ryan McMahon right now. And there was one showing 9 baseballs that would have been a home run at Yankee Stadium that were not, because either he hit it to, sort of center field, but right center at Oracle Park, or left center at Coors Field. Like, those are home runs at Yankee Stadium. So you go, man, he's at 16 home runs right now. Should he have 25? No, because you only have a home run in the ballpark that you've played in. There are times in which Ryan McMahon has been credited with a home run that wouldn't have been a home run at some ballparks, and vice versa. That's just kind of the lay of the land. I went on his Baseball Savant page, and I had to find out this concept of, okay, if you were to play all your games in one ballpark, how many home runs would you hit? Well, as it turns out, the ballpark in which he would have hit the most home runs this year would have been Citizens Bank Park in Philadelphia, 21 home runs. The ballpark in which he would have hit the fewest amount of home runs this season, if he would have played all 162, really his first 100 games this season is what we're talking about, Yankee Stadium would have been the ballpark in which he hit the fewest amount of home runs, only 13. 17 at Coors Field, so a little bit more than the 16 he has in real life. We'll see how this ends up playing out, because we know Ryan McMahon can spray the ball all around the diamond. I think he's going to fare really well for the Yankees. As I said, sort of a Scott Brosius type, who was not a superstar everywhere else he was. In fact, he wasn't even a superstar in New York, but because he was surrounded by superstars, he was able to elevate his game just a little bit and do exactly what was needed in the role that he was in. And we've seen McMahon do that already. He's done just a wonderful job. I want to talk some more about the Orioles and their tanking. Got a lot in my notes about it, but I do want to get to the Hall of Fame speeches that were great. We know the Orioles have a lot of guys on expiring contracts. So after trading Gregory Soto, they still got Charlie Morton, Zach Eflin, Tomoyuki Shigano. We saw on Sunday, looked pretty solid. Sir Anthony Dominguez. On the position player side, there's a pair of catchers in Gary Sanchez and, yes, Jacob Stallings. Yes, it's true. He's with the Orioles right now. They're having some catching issues, but there might be a team out there that need him. DH Ryan O'Hearn after his all-star first half. Cedric Mullins in center field, who made an outstanding catch to rob Orlando Arcia on Saturday. I posted that video over on social media at Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons MLB. And the question that I asked was, would you like to see the Rockies have an all-purple uniform like what the Orioles wear on Saturdays when they're at home? Will we see that at some point? I think so. From the simple fact that because of City Connect uniforms, you're going to get just about everything eventually. If the turnover is only going to be 3-4 years, at some point you're going to need to have something as bold as an all-purple uniform. So I could see that happening. Orioles also have a couple guys that have team options for next year. Andrew Kittredge, also saw him on Sunday. Ramon Laureano has been playing great. Jorge Mateo. They've got a lot of different opportunity to move guys. And I think there are some people that would look at the Orioles right now and say, see, tanking doesn't work. Tanking doesn't work. Look how bad the Orioles are playing. They're in last place in the AL East. But defining work is different to many folks. I think because the Cubs and the Astros tanked in the early 2010s and they both brought home a World Series, people might define tanking as winning a World Series, when I don't think that's true at all. For me, I don't think that's what success would be, because for the Orioles, who lost 115 games in 2018, then they brought in Mike Elias from the Houston Astros, who learned under Jeff Luhnow about how to win, how to build from the ground up, how to sell off your most valuable assets in order to bring back better players so that you could time it so that they were together at the same time, which we are seeing for the Orioles, despite it not working out right now. 108 losses in 2019. And we had the pandemic season in 2020, so it didn't really allow them to tap into that 100 loss potential. But they lose 110 in 2021. Done tanking. They win 83 games in 2022. And then back-to-back postseasons. 101 wins where they take down the Yankees, and win the AL East. Think about that. The tanking goes from being in the basement, losing 100 games, 3 out of 4 years, probably should be 4 consecutive years, to winning the AL East and beating the likes of the Yankees and Red Sox evil empire and the Rays lovable evil empire that they're always putting together. So they go to back-to-back postseasons for the first time since 96, 97. That's success to me. And they did it through the draft. They did it really well. Adley Rutschman, Gunnar Henderson in 2019. They also got Kyle Stowers in the second round, who they were able to use as a trade chip. In the fourth round, Joey Ortiz, who was used to acquire Corbin Burns last year. And then when Burns left in free agency, that allowed the Orioles to get a compensation pick, which was pick number 30 this past month. And they get Caden Bodine out of Coastal Carolina, the top catcher in the College World Series. That is how you manage your assets. You turn a fourth round pick in 2019 into a player that you draft in 2025 and is going to impact your club for future years. That's a decade's worth of value from a pick in 2019. They really continued to do that. And I think their drafting and developing has taken a hit over the last couple years. Even Jackson Holiday, first overall in 2022, hasn't really developed the way they would have liked. But you look at what they were able to do with the assets that they had at that time, and I would not say that the Orioles tanking has been a failure. It might be a disappointment right now, but their window is still absolutely open. So I do not think that it is a disappointment. Let's get into the Cleveland series real quick before I talk about the Hall of Fame. What's up with Cleveland? They're playing 500 ball. AL Central probably out of reach with how well Detroit has been playing. Final wild card is still within grasping distance. They just have a couple teams ahead of them, which is really the biggest issue, is jumping over, hurdling those teams. But in the last 9 seasons, they've gone to the postseason in most of them, in 6, I believe. In 2019, they won 93 games and missed out. 2023, 76 and 86, so they're 10 games under 500. But they, other than 2023, they have not been under 500 since 2012. You got to get somebody from that front office to come to Denver, and you need to do it yesterday. Their trade chips that are being discussed, many, but in the bullpen, Cade Smith, who was shut down last year. He was fantastic. Emmanuel Clase, 27-year-old closer with a huge pedigree already. He's been shaky this year, yes, but he's a 3-time All-Star already. He's making $4.9 million this year, $6.4 next year, and then 2 options for 2028 and 2029 at $10 million each. That is an incredible price for a 3-time All-Star. Cleveland got him from the Rangers, plus Delano DeShields Jr., who was on his way out of the majors at that point, for Corey Kluber, who was banged up at the time. So it was a brilliant trade for Cleveland. Now they might be able to spin that off and get even more for Corey Kluber, who had seen better days. So they're, again, managing assets well. We're also going to see Nolan Jones again. It'll be cool catching up with him. He's playing about as well this year as he was last year when he was hurt. So slightly below league average in terms of wins above replacement, does have 6 outfield assists. He's doing most of his damage against right-handed pitchers, which makes sense since he is a left-handed hitter. 225 batting average, on-base percentage 310, slugging 330. Not great. So Rockies looking like they have come out ahead so far of this deal. These guys are still young. We'll have to wait and see if the Rockies did truly win the trade. So far, it does look like they have with the great play that Tyler Freeman has been putting together so far. Probables, all to be announced for Cleveland right now. But here's who I think is going to be starting. We've got 4:40 start time on Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. We've got 3 night games, so you'll settle into a nice rhythm here to close out the month of July going into the deadline. It's Bradley Blaylock versus Slade Ciccone, formerly of the Diamondbacks. Tuesday, Tanner Gordon versus lefty Logan Allen, not the Logan Allen that's a right-hander, and that pitched with Albuquerque in 2022 and 23. And then on Wednesday, it's Kyle Freeland against possibly another lefty. That one's even harder to figure out, but it could be Doug Nikhazy. Let's jump to the chat real quick. which Rocky has the next potential to be in the Hall of Fame, Tulo or Cargo? Well, unfortunately, both of those gentlemen were on this past year's ballot, and I think Tulo got a vote, and I don't think Cargo got a vote. So they are off the ballot, and they will not be sniffing the Hall of Fame, even on a veterans ballot going forward. I said it back in, I want to say it was January of 2023, that after Todd Helton, the next guy that would get into the Hall of Fame that had the best shot, that I think a lot of people forgot about, that was a part of the Rockies organization. You don't think about him when you think about being a Rocky, but still, I said in January of 2023 that Jim Leyland had the best shot at being the next Rocky in the Hall of Fame. And sure enough, the Veterans Committee voted him in. In fact, he's actually the second Rocky ever elected to the Hall of Fame. Yes, Todd Helton had to wait till January. Jim Leyland did it in December of 23. Helton, January of 24. The next Rocky that gets into the Hall of Fame would not be Nolan Arenado, because he still has to play, and then it's still 5 more years beyond that before he even gets on a ballot, and then another year waiting from winter to summer. But the next Rocky that will get into the Hall of Fame before Nolan Arenado, and I don't have much doubt about it, it's going to be Dale Murphy, who, not a Rocky in the sense that you think, hey, did a couple things with Colorado, was remembered fondly for his time in Colorado. No, you could argue that his time in Colorado was even more fruitless, less fruitful than Jim Leyland, because he only played about a month and a half, 2 months with the Rockies. He was trying to get his 400th home run, just couldn't get it done. I think he had 1 extra base hit. It wasn't great, but he tried to hold on, and he's been a class act. He's a guy that in the early 80s, he won back-to-back NL MVP awards with Atlanta. And his numbers, if you compare him to other players from that era, he absolutely deserves a spot in Cooperstown. He's not a Willie Mays inner Hall of Fame kind of guy. He's not Albert Pujols, Miguel Cabrera, even an Ichiro. You might even say, is he on the Harold Baines extreme? I mean, he's closer to that than Willie Mays, but I think Dale Murphy will eventually get in sooner or later. I'd love to see some kind of push for a Veterans Committee for an Andres Galarraga. I could see that happening. We're probably about a decade away from something like that going down, but I did see that Jake Storielli from John Boy Media doing a video about how great Andres Galarraga was, and I think almost nobody realized how great of a career Andres Galarraga have, especially when you go back and consider all of the first basemen that are being kept out of the Hall of Fame and all the other sluggers from the 90s and early 2000s that are being held out of the Hall of Fame because of PED use. Galarraga had the numbers, came back from cancer twice, 2-time comeback player of the year. I think he's got a much better shot than people realize. In fact, I think Galarraga is much more deserving of the Hall of Fame than a Troy Tulowitzki and Carlos Gonzalez, who I think Cargo, I don't know that he had a longer career of impact than Tulo. I think they were probably about the same. Tulo might have even been a little bit longer, but certainly his peak seasons were better than Cargo's peak seasons. But unfortunately, not enough there for Troy Tulowitzki to make it into the Hall of Fame. But I did see Todd Helton there. I didn't see Larry Walker. He was probably there. But let me know in the chat if you saw Larry Walker at the Hall of Fame inductions. Usually all the living Hall of Famers do attend. It's pretty rare that they're not there. They know this is on the calendar every year until they die, until they pass away. So I'm sure he was there. I just didn't see him. I did see Todd Helton. It was cool that Nico Smith, Ozzie Smith's son, sang the national anthem. They did a fantastic job. Didn't realize Nico Smith, he was on the 4th season of American Idol. That was cool. First one up, leading off, the closer, coincidentally, a guy who was a starting pitcher all throughout his minor league career and became a closer and a relief pitcher as soon as he reached the majors. Billy Wagner giving a shout out to Lance Berkman, saying he deserves to be a Hall of Famer. Berkman is a cuspy guy. Had a .293 batting average in the regular season, .317 batting average in the postseason. Didn't compile a ton, but with Craig Biggio, Jeff Bagwell, and now Billy Wagner in the Hall of Fame, that's 3 prominent Houston Astros teammates for Lance Berkman, who could eventually push to get him in a Veterans Committee. at some point. That wouldn't be that crazy. And if that were to happen, to go back on what I said before, if you can get Lance Berkman in, you can get Matt Holliday in. Holliday on the outside looking in. I think potentially he could be a guy that does get into the Hall of Fame at some point. He was on the ballot and then off immediately, which is a shame because I think more people need to realize how solid of a career that he had. Didn't realize Billy Wagner was a Division III player. First and only Division III player in the Hall of Fame. I love Moises Alou getting a shout out as probably like a first class, like an inner ring Hall of Very Good, just a player that doesn't get mentioned all that much. He was great. You love Octavio Dotel, rest in peace, getting a shout out, former Rockies reliever. Dave Parker's son, who looks identical to his father. I love that. And Dick Allen's widow, Willa Allen, both did an incredible job. Dave Parker's son actually read the speech that Dave wrote before he passed away. That was great. Dave Parker's speech, read by his son, underrated, very good. CC Sabathia, he was all about family. I love that he said Ichiro stole his 2001 American League Rookie of the Year award. That's hilarious. Probably not funny to the one writer in Cleveland who in 2001 gave CC Sabathia the first place vote in AL Rookie of the Year award voting, which meant Ichiro was one vote short of being unanimous. That was a big deal at the time. And one of the reasons why was because he considered Ichiro not to be a rookie, even though he voted him second since he had already been a professional over in Japan. That's a debate for another day. But CC got me choked up talking about his mother, talking about his family. That was probably the most emotional of all of the speeches. I love that he was able to touch on his bout with alcoholism. I was very proud of him for mentioning that. And then Ichiro closing it out. He had about a 20-minute speech. It was excellent. It was funny. This is his 8th time visiting Cooperstown. I have a book. I didn't prepare it with me. I picked it up a couple months ago that I think came out in 2004. I've never seen it before. It was, I think, $2 hardcover. Couldn't pass it up. It was called Ichiro on Ichiro. And it was really just like a long form interview and conversation in his early days of being a big leaguer. And one of the first pictures was 2001, in the winter of 2001, when he first came to America full time after signing with the Seattle Mariners, that he went to Cooperstown. So, he talked a lot in this speech about the difference between dreams and goals. Is that dreams are something you might not ever be able to achieve, but if you can turn those dreams into a goal, now you've got something to strive for, something you can get to. And as a guy who, growing up in Japan, didn't even know Cooperstown and the Baseball Hall of Fame existed, it really was something he could have only dreamed about. And eventually, once he did learn about it, it became a goal of his. And so he eventually was able to live out that dream while an adult. Again, not knowing that it existed as a young man growing up in Japan. He started off by saying, that he's a rookie for the 3rd time in his career. The first time, the Orioles Blue Wave in NPB, then in Seattle at 27 years old in the majors. And now again, as a Hall of Famer, quipping, hey, I'm 51, easy on the hazing. First one, crushed. He gave thanks to the Miami Marlins, where he got his 3,000th hit. Also referenced the fact that he did it in Colorado, which was fantastic. I think I might have even been in that video of his 3,000th hit. I know I'm in the video. I pull it up every once in a while. I got tickets as a fan. It was before I officially became a media member. And I know where I'm at. I had an aisle seat, immediately jumped down, went down a couple steps as the ball was flying towards right field, but I knew it was going to be short. But I knew, me, with my light blue cap on and my light blue shirt on, where I was at. So they played that video, thought that was really cool. And he said, when the Marlins contacted me and offered me a contract in 2015, I have to admit, I never heard of your team. And that it's so funny. I almost can't laugh because that is such a dagger. That's such a killer to the entire Marlins organization. Of course, he's known who the Marlins were. I didn't look up to see if he had ever played against the Marlins, but 99.9% sure that at some point he would have crossed paths with them. I mean, come on. That's just a great line. It's just hilarious. Gave a great shout out to Hideo Nomo, which I loved as the guy who paved the way for Japanese players. Ichiro, the first Japanese-born position player to make an impact and come over from the Nippon Professional Baseball League. But it's crazy to think that even now, here in 2025, after Ichiro, and I'm going to lump Hideki Matsui in there because they were from that same era, Matsui coming over in 2003. But there hasn't been another Japanese superstar position player. Think about that. It wasn't even that he paved the way for others to follow. Nobody has kept pace with Ichiro. No one. Matsui was a 2-time All-Star, had a really solid career, and before Shohei Ohtani came along, had the most home runs by a Japanese-born player. But no other Japanese position player has ever been a multi-time All-Star. As I dug into it, only one Japanese position player has ever been an All-Star outside of Ichiro and Matsui. That's Kosuke Fukudome in 2008. That's it. Crazy to think how legendary and how improbable, many would say, his career was. Exactly 2 hitters ever got 3,000 hits after their age 26 season. Remember, he came over at age 27. So it was all after his age 26 season. Pete Rose did that as well. And then you take the flip side and you say, well, how about early on in a career? Well, how about the first 7 seasons in the majors? Chuck Klein is number 4, number 3, Paul Waner, number 2, Kirby Puckett, number 1, Ichiro Suzuki, 1,354 most hits in the first 7 years in the big leagues. Even after his speech, talking with John Paul Morosi on MLB Network, he had one more gem. John Paul saying, he ended the interview by saying, "Arigatou gozaimasu," which means thank you very much in Japan, to which Ichiro responded, "De nada," which means thank you in Spanish. So Ichiro absolutely crushed it. Very, very memorable. Loved it. 10 out of 10. Rockies Insider with me, Patrick Lyons, your Rockies Insider. You voted me. You elected me. I think. Talking about Warming Bernabel, major league debut, the call-up. What's his story? I've got some minor league notes, a little bit more than that. But let's talk about Warming Bernabel here, getting the call-up officially on Saturday. The 23-year-old who had previously been on the 40-man roster, was designated for assignment after a tough season in Double-A Hartford, where it looked like maybe he wasn't going to be the guy, and yet still kept grinding, still kept doing his thing. Repeated Double-A Hartford last year, playing really well with the Triple-A Isotopes. Had a 301 batting average down in the Pacific Coast League with an OPS north of 800 in 75 games, 18 doubles, 8 homers. So maybe not a ton of power, but putting the ball in play, getting the job done on both corners. He was a third baseman coming up. He has been playing a little bit more first base. And in the month of June, in particular, he was really great, hitting in 14 out of 15 games over his career. Again, predominantly a third baseman. 1 game at second base. He is DH'd a little bit, so the glove has been strong there for the former minor league organizational all-star in 2022. That was when, at the end of that season, he was added to the 40-man roster, stayed on that roster for all of 2023 before getting designated for assignment at the end of spring training in 2024. But he's a guy that's continued to stick around, and the Rockies love to promote these kind of players and reward them with call-ups when they've been a draft and develop player or an international signing that they develop. That's why I thought Bernabel had an inside track over someone like an Aaron Schunk who had already debuted. So now this allows them to sort of pump up their numbers just a little bit. That's not to say Bernabel doesn't deserve this opportunity, but for the Rockies, they now have an opportunity to give somebody else a chance. And when a guy's only 23 years old and he's playing really well down in the minors, you might have something on your hands if those adjustments can be made. What I find to be interesting is that Bernabel started both of his games on Saturday and Sunday at first base. You had Orlando Arcia at third base all 3 games on Saturday. Bernabel did end up moving over to third base late in that game. Toglia over at first base. But it does make you question, is the Michael Toglia era over? Is he now on notice with Bernabel coming up? A player that is not necessarily a major prospect. He was a guy that, for me, was on my top 30 prospects going into the year, considering how young he was, how good enough his numbers were last year at AA, and the fact that he can play some third base. Only 23 years old. Again, you check off enough of those boxes, you're doing something right. If you are in your late 20s and you have yet to make your major league debut, no matter how good you're doing, your ceiling is going to be capped because you are already in the prime of your career. But when you are in your early 20s, sometimes even mid 20s, but when you're in your early 20s, your ceiling can potentially get projected to be that much higher. So you are going to have an advantage as a 23-year-old over a 27, 28-year-old. Same is true for relief pitchers. It's another reason why, you might see some of the younger guys that are down there getting opportunities, and someone like a Dugan Darnell, now at this point, why hasn't he been promoted despite the fact that he's had a lot of success? Because there's the business side of baseball that goes beyond that unfortunately isn't always about who deserves this opportunity. It's more about, well, what are the implications in this? And if you've got another option that is a little bit younger, that maybe is more projectable, that guy is going to get that opportunity. That being said, I do think Dugan Darnell is going to get an opportunity to make his debut if he can continue to pitch well with the Isotopes. The home run on Sunday, 385-foot blast for Bernabel, was solid, looked great. Ball flew right off of his bat. So you like to see that. 2 hits in his 2 games. But going back to Michael Toglia, with him now not getting that start, it does make you question if first base is going to be the final spot for Bernabel, who can play third base. But we know Kyle Karros can play third base. We saw him on Sunday hitting his first AAA home run with the Albuquerque Isotopes at altitude in Salt Lake City. It's one of the reasons why I think Salt Lake City could be a sneaky good option for Major League Baseball as their West Coast team. I know Portland seems like they have the leg up, but Salt Lake City, I think, is going to be players when it comes time for expansion in the next couple of years. So Karros getting on the board, showing that power, maybe not as much power as you'd like from a first baseman. Same would be true for Warming Bernabel. But at this point, you'll worry about that power later. Right now, hit some doubles, hit some extra base hits, and maybe that power will develop into something else. Also, you got to play steady defense at first base. You got to be able to put the ball in play. So the days of those big thumpers at first base, yeah, there's still plenty that do exist. And there's plenty more that are going to exist. But if you're striking out 35% more than that, like a Michael Toglia, right now for the Rockies, they've sort of soured on Michael Toglia in that way, despite the fact that, as crazy as it might seem, Michael Toglia, in some ways, depends on how you want to define the word tenure, but Michael Toglia is the longest tenured position player on this roster, having debuted at the end of August in 2022. Ezequiel Tovar is the only one that also debuted in 2022, and that was in September. Now, Toglia, because of his options going back and forth to AAA, he actually has less service time than Tovar. But still, Michael Toglia, if you go back and look at that roster in late August, the only name that you're going to see on it from a position player that is still on this team is Michael Toglia. Now, Bernabel's call-up story was kind of a funny one. Paige Leckie, who writes for MLB.com and was there in Baltimore. You will get Thomas Harding in Cleveland coming up. So rest assured, he will be down there, boots on the ground. Same thing with my buddy Kevin Henry, covering the Rockies during the trade deadline. Not sure if Bill Schmidt is going to make that trip. Make of that what you will. We'll see. Maybe he does show up in Cleveland to answer any questions, to talk with players, should they get traded. But from what I'm hearing, it seems like he might not be making that trip. That remains to be seen. But Paige Leckie covering it down in Baltimore, catching up with Warming Bernabel and third base coach Andy Gonzalez, who served as the translator for the story. But Pedro Lopez, aka Pilo, if you ever watch video, if you're ever watching Inside Coors Field over on the Rockies Insider, there's plenty of video from Warren Schaefer and other players who've made their major league debut. And when they talk about their call-up story, they talk about their manager for the Isotopes in AAA, Pedro Lopez. They'll say, Pilo called me into his office, ... In this instance, Pilo called Warming Bernabel to his hotel room when they were in Salt Lake City. And he told the 23-year-old, hey, Warming, you've been traded. Bernabel said, no way. He was just absolutely dumbfounded. And then Pedro Lopez said, no, we didn't trade you. You're going to the show. You got called up. You're going to the big leagues. So good news for him. Good news for Rockies fans. A new shiny toy to potentially get excited about going forward. I'm curious as to, maybe I'm not curious. I'm going to make a statement rather than I'm going to ask a question. Yeah, in the chat, Tolia, it's more like tenuous. Yes, his hold over first base is definitely tenuous, but not curious. I'm thinking for Bill Schmidt, who are some of the teams that he needs to have on speed dial, or what numbers does he want to flag and say, when I get a phone call from this team, from this area code, who do I need to pick up immediately? Because there's a handful of teams right now that Bill Schmidt could definitely pull some really good prospects from. There was an article written by The Athletic talking about general managers who are feeling pressure at this deadline. Not that you would necessarily say they're on the hot seat, but that they are feeling pressure. And when I read that headline, for about a quarter of a second, I thought, oh, okay, Bill Schmidt, he's got to crush this trade deadline. I don't know if it'll save his job, but it's an incredibly important trade deadline for the Rockies. Every trade deadline is incredibly important for the Rockies. If you are contending, if you are trying to go for the postseason, it's incredibly important because you need to add pieces. That was something that last week Nolan Arenado said. He thought that Jeff Bridich should have done a lot more to support the team in 2017 and 2018. 2017, we're talking Jonathan Lucroy and Pat Neshek. I think that was actually more that they did than in 2018 when they could have won the division. And all they brought in was Sungwon Oh and a third-string catcher in Drew Butera. No knock on him, but they already had two really good options at catcher. Oh, yeah, they did have Matt Holliday, but they just convinced him to come out of retirement. So they didn't offer up anything. They didn't have to give up anything. They didn't make any further investment in the team. And had they done something, that could have been the difference in winning the team's first NL West pennant. With the opportunity to do that, the Rockies decided, nah, no thanks. We want to hold on to some of our prospects like a Brendan Rodgers, who we would see the next year in 2019. But I think looking back on it, you say you have an opportunity to make an impact at the trade deadline. And even if you were to trade a guy like a Brendan Rodgers in 2018, well, guess what? When you're out of it in 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, if you trade your best players because they're not going to be around for your next contending season, then guess what? You can now take a Brendan Rodgers from another organization. You can now bolster your farm system with a top 100 prospect. Now, that does mean a lot of shuffling. That does mean a lot of trading. That does mean a lot of aggressive deals. It does mean a lot of work for the front office. And it might be hard for a smaller front office like the Rockies. And the front office doesn't choose its size. The owner does. So I understand that difficulty, but if the Rockies really treated every trade deadline as an opportunity on the market to exploit other teams and say, hey, these assets are in short supply. We've got some. And frankly, we're not going to be good for the next couple years. And the Rockies, since 2020, have not been honest in looking in the mirror and realizing we aren't going to be good for the next couple years. We keep talking about these prospects making an impact, but do we really know if they're going to? And are they truly that good? Or do we just have to believe that they are that good because the people who drafted those guys and developed those guys are the ones that are in power? And to admit that they're not good means admitting that you failed at your job, or at least that you didn't do as good of a job as you've been making it out to be this entire time to the owner. So it's a catch-22. And if you're not honest about it, you are going to get caught. I think Schmidt not being on that list is understandable because there just isn't pressure. There's a lot of belief that this offseason they are going to change GMs. They're going to go slightly a different route. Is it going to be a radical enough of route to really make you feel like there's going to be a change? Not to knock anyone that believed in Bill Schmidt, but Bill Schmidt was a homegrown hire. And Dick Monfort said he was going to go outside the organization, and he didn't. And yes, you want to give a guy an opportunity to do his job, but I'm not really sure what belief should have been held for him to follow through and really buck a trend that the Rockies were going to get themselves back into contention. And I know you want to believe certain things, but when the evidence is right there in front of you, you can't ignore it. You can't really ignore it. So keep that in mind. I say that now because when the time does come and there is going to be a change this off season, think about now what would constitute you saying this is going to be a good change. What would that actually look like? And if it is not that, it's understandable that you want to spin it and say, hey, I can make chicken salad out of chicken, you know what? But the reality is, this is not the right move. It's not the major change that this organization needs. And so the same is true for the trade deadline. Think about how many trades the Rockies should be making in order to improve their odds of being relevant in the future. It should be at least 2.5. That's I think what a lot of people are expecting. 2.5 trades, maybe 2.5 players, 3.5 players. When the reality is it should be closer to 5 or 6. 4 trades with 5 or 6 players, a lot more like 2023. If that doesn't happen, can you really feel good about the Ryan McMahon trade and say, hey, I love what the Rockies did? Can you? You can love a single trade, but do you love everything about that trade deadline? Got to be honest. And you got to hold certain people's feet to the fire if they don't get that job done. But going back to Bill Schmidt and some of the teams that have prospects that can be exploited. And depending on when you listen to this, maybe some of these players will already be off the board. But the Cubs, if you're looking for big league ready talent, they've got 3 that are in MLB Pipeline's top 100 prospect list that are all at AAA, playing for the Iowa Cubs. So if you're looking for something more immediate, the Cubs can go there. You can go there with them. Sure, a lot of them are outfielders. Cubs don't really have any openings right now for their outfield. And I think you could say, well, Colorado doesn't have any openings in the outfield either. But how many of their outfielders right now are in that outfield mix going forward? Other than Jordan Beck, who do you know is going to be around in 2-3 years? I don't know if anyone beyond Jordan Beck you can say that about right now. I think you feel good about Doyle still, and you can give him a pass this season, and he should get a pass. But beyond that, is Mickey Moniak an asset that you're going to extend, considering he's only going to be around for 2 more years? I don't think so. You do have Matt Shaw if you're looking to get a corner infielder. He's not hitting well in the majors, but that's a chip to consider acquiring. And when you think about the players that I talked about, and when I talk about the outfielders, talking about Owen Casey, Moises Ballesteros, Kevin Alcantara, and third baseman Matt Shaw, you go, well, Patrick, isn't that where their best prospects are, in the outfield and at third base, right? Cal Karros is there. Maybe even pencil in a Charlie Condon. So do we really need those prospects? To that I say yes, because none of those prospects, even the ones from the Cubs and even the ones from the Rockies, have not done anything in the major leagues just yet. So none of them are proven. Those kind of things will sort themselves out. You rather have 2 prospects at the same position than only 1. And keep in mind, the Rockies have definitely done a good job of trying to program their fans in different ways by saying, this guy's the next thing. This guy's the next thing. And when they don't go out and acquire, say, a third baseman or a corner outfielder, you go, well, do they need a corner outfielder? Because they've got Zach Veen and Yanquiel Fernandez. Weren't we saying the same thing 3-4 years ago about the Jonathan Dazas of the world and the Aaron Shunks, that they were going to be like these next saviors from the team because you knew their names from when they were drafted to when they were in the top 30 in the franchise's top 30 prospect rankings. So prospects for the Rockies, unfortunately, lately have been suspects. So to somehow think that getting a prospect from another organization is a bad thing because you already have your prospects in place, I think is not the right kind of thinking at all. You need more guys. You need more battle. You need more competition. You need more assets. Whether they're major league ready or not is besides the point. Take advantage of those teams that have those top 100 prospects. The Mariners have 8 right now. Think about that. And you got them at every level. Do you want an outfielder like Lazaro Montes? Do you want a Michael Arroyo? How about a catching prospect in Harry Ford in AAA? Are you still convinced that Drew Romo is the catcher of the future? Hunter Goodman, is he going to be able to stick at catcher for the next couple of years? Or will he have to move off of catcher in, say, 2 or 3? Maybe he's more of a Buster Posey kind of type where he has to move off of catcher over to first base, or Wilson Contreras. Harry Ford could still be there behind the plate if you're able to work out a deal with the Mariners, who are looking to add. The Mariners also have a deep top 30 system, so even if you're not getting one of those top 100 prospects, you're going to be okay. Consider the fact that Seattle has never reached the World Series. Everything has been lining up for them on their roster to be that team to go to the World Series and make a deep postseason run, especially given their starting rotation, how good it's been. So they may be more aggressive than in years past and deal from this prospect depth. Take advantage of that. Phillies can always be taken advantage of because Dave Dombrowski loves trading those prospects. You got infielder in Aiden Miller, outfielder Justin Crawford. If you're a rebuilding team, you can get guys like a Justin Crawford, or if you want to Mick Abel, you can go the pitching route there. Detroit, I don't think he's going to want to trade any of their top 100 prospects, Matt Clark, and shortstops Bryce Rayner and Kevin McGonigal. But the next tier is pretty darn good too. Josue Briseño, Tyron Lorenzo, catcher, very interesting options. Hao-Yu Lee, Jaden Ham, all of those guys would fit in really nicely in the top 10, if not top 5 of the Rockies system. And do you dare do a deal with the Dodgers? Since we know their system is always loaded. The answer, why not? Doing a deal with the Dodgers, making a trade with Los Angeles cannot harm the Rockies any more than the Rockies have harmed themselves. Make that trade. Work something out. Don't worry about headlines about so-and-so making an impact for the Dodgers after leaving. Yeah. There was an article in The Athletic about Yency Almonte where he found something and figured some things out with the Dodgers after he left the Rockies. Where is he now? And does that really matter? What's more embarrassing, that a relief pitcher leaves Denver and has success elsewhere? Am I talking about Yency Almonte? Am I talking about Carlos Estevez? Am I talking about Jeff Hoffman? Maybe I'm talking about all those guys. But that happens in baseball. Might it happen to the Rockies more than anyone else? Sure. But it happens in baseball. That's all right. What can happen is losing 120 plus games in a season, or losing 100 games 3 years in a row and not really having a plan how to get out of it. That can't happen. So don't worry about making trades with the Dodgers or Yankees. So I said it in the emergency pod. Go back and check that out. When Ryan McMahon was first traded, people saying, oh, we're a minor league team for the rest of Major League Baseball. I don't know what to tell you. If your team is going to be out of the postseason for the 7th consecutive year, the longest drought they've ever had, and it's going to end up going to 8 next year with what right now looks like a 100-loss season in 2026 before we even know who's on the roster. It's embarrassing to be that bad. It's not embarrassing to trade off an asset to a large market club and bring back prospects. That's how you sustain yourself, is you say, all right, well, we're not a big fish. We can't spend. We can't have all the best superstars, but our goal is to win a championship. Our goal is to win games. Our goal is to develop players. And this is the way that we can do it. Cleveland does it that way. Tampa does it that way. Milwaukee does it that way. And does it suck when you have to trade some of those young players? those young stars? Yes, but it's with one goal in mind, getting back to October. And so far, the Rockies have not figured out how to do that. Mets, even now, still the Yankees have prospects that they can deal from and that we'd be willing to move. Red Sox, Brewers, all those guys are in there. Last couple little tidbits. Did mention this roster move on Sunday. Pair of fresh arms coming up from AAA. Jaden Hill, Angel Chivigi came up. Got to see Jaden Hill on Sunday. Going down in two different ways. But Zach Agnos goes down to the IL, unfortunately. Not a pretty sight on Saturday night. He hits the 15-day IL with a right flexor strain, and then lefty Ryan Rolison down to AAA, leaving the Rockies currently without a lefty. That's just going to happen. Not sure if you saw this, but if you want to get your ducks in a row, because right now Paul Skeens is scheduled to be probable. So it's a double qualifier there. But he's scheduled to be the probable pitcher on Saturday at Coors Field. That's a day game. Hopefully I'll see you at the ballpark for that. But Rockies have a special package right now. All 14 games in the month of August. $39.99. You can go to all 4 games against the Dodgers. You don't get a seat, standing room only. But you get to see Pittsburgh and Toronto that first week, Arizona, Dodgers, and then the Cubs on Labor Day weekend. So if you are still going to games and you want to get a good deal, and look, if you want to do it on the secondary market so that money does not go directly towards the Rockies, you do it that way. But it can be hard to get a ticket, or a cheap ticket at least, when the Dodgers come to town. $40, you're covered for all 14 games. Final question, how much does Walker Monfort have a voice in the room now with these decisions? Well, Walker's more on the business side of things. That being said, if you don't think he's going to have a say in some of these decisions, I think you'd be wrong. So, Dick Monfort, his voice is the loudest as the primary owner of the team. And when he leaves, he wants his sons to have the loudest voice. He wants his sons to be the ones that are in charge. And so right now, Walker looking to step into that team president role for Greg Fiesel. I think he is going to have a big voice. And so far, the business moves that have been made under his watch, if you want to give him credit for that, have been good so far. So, we will have to wait and see what's going to happen. But until things change, I would not expect a change, right? You want to give people the benefit of the doubt. But when you have an organization that has done things the same way for a very long time and have not made radical changes and have not admitted and looked into the mirror to say, here's what's wrong, here's how we're going to fix it, here's the plan. When that doesn't happen, it's really hard to have confidence to say, yeah, no, these changes are definitely coming because there's a new name on the door. I don't get that correlation at all. So we'll have to wait and see. You can give them a chance, give them an opportunity, but when push comes to shove, are those changes actually going to get made? Time will tell. At Patrick D. Lyons, at Patrick D. Lyons, MLB, and the Rockies Insider over on YouTube. Please subscribe to that. Appreciate you dropping by. Appreciate the momentum you've provided me. But unfortunately, that momentum can only be as good as my next show. So, of course, I'll talk to you then.